Uhuru, brothers and sisters and comrades. This is Amali Shatella, chairman of the African People's Socialist Party and leader of the Uhuru movement in the International African Revolution. I want to thank you for coming on to this discussion. It's an important discussion. As you know, many of you anyway, that for at least since the beginning of the year, we've seen an escalation of struggle happening in Haiti. Thousands and thousands, masses of African people are rising up against the existing president. And in fact, the slogan "Down with the Dictator" has become the norm there. The government under the leadership of Juvenal Moise has resorted to all kinds of terrorism to try and stop this struggle, stop the resistance. And so we want to talk about this because it is something that has finally thrust the issue of China, that has finally thrust the issue of Haiti onto the pages and onto the websites of various kinds of people who normally do not pay attention to what's happening to Haiti or to African people in general, and who do not see us as essential forces in terms of the questions that have to be resolved in order for there to be a peaceful existence of human beings on the planet Earth. And I want to talk about that because there have been a whole lot of, there has been a lot of discussions about different actions and things that people should be doing in defense of our people in Haiti and in opposition to what the Haitian government is doing and how that is being supported in some way or another or influenced by the United States government. And we need to talk about this because the question of Haiti is one of the most under-respected, under-recognized historical issues, struggles on the planet Earth, of all peoples on Earth. You would be hard-pressed to find a single struggle of us, any people that is as significant historically as the struggle of our people on that small island of Haiti. So first of all, let's get to a kind of understanding of the current situation in Haiti. We have government-employed gangs, bandits who are kidnapping, raping, and murdering students and teachers and lawyers and doctors and working people, and especially those who have expressed anti-government remarks. So these are serious attacks. I cannot overstate how powerful, how atrocious these attacks are. And then, of course, they are kidnapping people for ransom. This is just happening across the board in Haiti. And in late January, we saw thousands of people who took to the streets of Port-au-Prince to demand that Juvenal Moise resign from office and to condemn the insecurity that they say is created by Moise's regime. And the police were met with police violence, deaths, threats from government-employed gangs and bandits. And police have been shooting journalists who were covering the demonstrations with rubber bullets and what have you. So this is part of what's been happening in Haiti. This is part of the fact is that the struggle has become so intense in Haiti that it again has drawn attention from various liberals and activists inside the United States and other parts of the world. And so we need to say something about that. I know that a number of demonstrations or a few demonstrations have been organized, one by the Black Alliance for Peace, who is a member, more than one, 2 or 3, who is a member of the coalition, Black is Black Coalition for Social Justice, Peace and Reparations. Another by UNAC, which is a white anti-war organization, coalition that characterizes itself as the largest anti-war coalition in the United States. So this is part of what it is that we have been looking at. And people are trying to respond to that. And the question is, what kind of responses are appropriate response? And obviously it is absolutely important for people, our people, you, to engage in protests against what the government of Haiti is doing to our people there, and to protest how that government is being supported by the United States government. And I want you to remember that this is not Trump, this is Biden, this is a Democrat and what have you. This is not the fascist, if you will, Trump. This is the colonialist Biden that is now presiding over the situation, that they're trying to get people to back off. They're trying to get the US government to back off and to stop supporting the regime of Jovenel Moise. That support for Moise's regime has been extended by the United States government, through the United States government, to the so-called Organization of American States. Remember, the Organization of American States is a creature of US imperialism, and for a long period of time, it refused to even allow Cuba to participate in it, even as the United States was able to participate in this so-called Organization of American States. So let's look at what it is that we are talking about. So the Constitution of Haiti that was created in 1987 restricted a president to a term of 5 years, and with the inability to serve 2 consecutive terms. And so Jovenel, the guy who's in office today, his term ended on February 7, 2021, but he says he won't leave until February 7, 2022. And he announced that he dissolved the parliament. He's been ruling by decree for a while now. In November 26, there was a state-owned newspaper. Jovenel announced that that's the Le Moniteur, that a decree that actions such as robbery, arson, anyway, the things that more likely blocking the roads that would be done by protesters, people who oppose to his regime, would be considered acts of terrorism and would be subjected to heavy penalties that could include 30 to 50 years in prisons and extraordinary amounts of money in terms of fines. And Jovenel Moise also declared that he was going to create this intelligence agency that was responded only to him, to the president. And this is back similar to something that so-called Papa Doc Duvalier did with the Tonton Macoute in 1959, this dreaded dark glass wearing terroristic organization, thugs that worked directly under the leadership of the president at that time. And so, you know, we've seen different organizations responding to that. The premier, if you will, liberal publication, a radical liberal publication in the United States, The Nation, did a pretty extensive article on what is happening in Haiti. So Haiti is getting some attention, and that's really important. But it's also important for us to understand what it is that we're looking at, because the question is not just Jovenel Moise. When you talk about Haiti, there's a whole history that we have to look at, and I want to ask you to look at that also. But you know, at the same time of the Haitian Revolution, that lasted from August of 1791 to 1803, when January 1st, 1804, independence was declared. At the same time, Africans in Haiti were engaged in trying to get rid of French colonialism. African people who in other parts of the Caribbean dominated by France were doing the same thing. And specifically, we're talking about Martinique, we're talking about Guadeloupe, and who these are countries that even today exist under French colonial domination. Even today, they are fighting against French colonial domination. So we're talking about something obviously that's bigger than that. And also, I think it's really important to know that France was and continues to be a powerful colonizer force in the whole world, all over Africa. France had used its tests for atomic weapons. Algeria was one of the places where they tested their atomic weapons. They tested atomic weapons in the South Pacific region where colonized people are located. So the fact is that France is a terroristic organization entity, and that came into being as a consequence of its colonial domination, particularly of Africa and other places around the world. It's important for us to understand that. So I just want to say a little bit about the hate situation in Haiti, because there are things that I think we have to learn from it. And we just can't follow those who simply get engaged on whatever is trending as the political direction that informs us. We just can't latch on to what is trending at the moment. We need to have an understanding of Haiti. We need to understand of what happens in Haiti, its significance in the world, its significance in the revolutionary project of the workers and oppressed peoples of the world. It's significant to us as African people. What is Haiti? And who should be defining how to move in that? And that's part of what it is that we want to look at. So just going back, we said that this revolution in Haiti, which is an extraordinarily powerful revolution. And if you are aware of the kinds of conflicts that existed in that island at the time, how there were different sectors, even of people who were colonized by France, the so-called mulattoes, the free Africans, the Africans who were enslaved, the various other forces like white people who were there and who also wanted to some extent have independence from France, but they wanted to maintain the enslavement of African people. These are some of the political currents that were at work in Haiti at the time of the Haitian Revolution. And it was an extraordinary explosion of revolutionary fervor that had to cut through all of that, and that had to determine what the direction of this movement for freedom of our people in Haiti was going to take. And so at the time of the Haitian Revolution, 2/3 of the Africans who were enslaved in Haiti were born in Africa. And that's important for us to understand, because captivity is something that one can become accustomed to. In fact, the US military, when it teaches things about escape and evasion rather, the US military teaches that one thing that a person who has been captured is obligated to do is try to escape as soon as possible, because they say that you can get accustomed to being in captivity, and you get accustomed to the routines and what have you associated with captivity. So you should try to free yourselves from captivity as quickly as possible. And the same thing is true when you look at Africans who have been under captivity. That's why those thugs, those white people, those who have captured us, those colonial capitalists who built their whole economy, the world, their lives, their hopes and dreams off of our enslavement. That's why they took us through these horrific processes that they call breaking us, to keeping us in places so that they could hold us in pins and break us and break our spirit, so that they can take the memory of freedom, that it subsides if it's not the basic dominating memory that we have. Because if we have a prominent memory of freedom, then that's what we constantly fighting for. But if the oppressor can create situations and circumstances under which every aspect of your life is trying to survive under these circumstances, and then one can get captured by the process of just living under captivity. That's why Harriet Tubman had to carry a gun, because even though she was leading some people to freedom, at least as it was determined, getting away from the legal slavery former slavery inside the United States, there were Africans who would want to turn back. And someone said, well, that's abnormal. But it's not abnormal. Just like the majority of Africans who we know in the United States, and we know much of the world, it's not abnormal, because we grow up in circumstances that are constrained, that are defined intellectually, ideologically, physically, by the relationship that we have to colonialism. And so even under the former slavery, colonial slavery in the United States, a person who was in captivity at minimum came to understand that you eat at this time, you sleep at this place, you can have sex, a lover, and this, etc. And this is establishes the basic life that one has. And so one can get comfortable, and not necessarily comfortable in the sense that we enjoy every aspect of it, but this routine becomes something that's normalized. And so at the time of the Haitian Revolution, however, 2/3 of the Africans who were enslaved in Haiti were Africans who were born in Africa, and were not necessarily accustomed to being enslaved. And then, of course, you had large sectors of the African population who were maroons, had escaped into the mountains and what have you, and were actually engaged in struggle against the French for a longer period of time. And so there was a living assumption of Africa and Africanity in the African population in Haiti that may have been subdued, submerged, and otherwise affected with a false sense of national consciousness than what we saw in Haiti. So even today in Haiti, the Africa connection is very strong, and Africans in Haiti may never have been to Haiti, may never even think about going to Haiti, but Haiti, Africa lives in them because this is how that revolution unfolded, and this is how the consciousness of the African population in Haiti that became revolutionary consciousness was something that revolved around this population from Africa who were in Haiti, who were born in Africa. So one of the things that we keep hearing that we need to talk about also is the role of voodoo, because there are people who tell us that that the Haitian Revolution was very powerful and was made possible because of voodoo. And there's even an assumption in certain quarters that we have to resort to voodoo as a philosophy, as a worldview, in order to break out of our to become free. And it's an attempt to impose on a revolutionary project a kind of idealistic philosophical foundation. And of course, it is true that voodoo played a really important role. I mean, you had Boukman, who was an extraordinary revolutionary leader in Haiti, who organized people and around voodoo. But it's not just like that. It was science to it, because what people have come to understand is that the belief system, if you can assault the belief system of a group of people, it makes them more susceptible to submission to the oppressor. So if the oppressor can replace the belief system of the people and impose another belief system on the people, then the people end up following the oppressor. That's why you hear many Black nationalists and stuff like that talking about that white Jesus in your house, because this is something that is sort of understood. So when you have Boukman, and you're talking about Africans who from all over the continent of Africa who are now located in Haiti, and probably dealing with contending philosophical worldviews, then Boukman succeeded. Magnetic personality, strong, courageous man is the one who put forth voodoo. And he didn't just put voodoo forward, he put voodoo as a substitute, as a negation of the worldview of the white people, of the colonizer, which was Catholicism or Christianity. And in fact, even today, there are representatives of imperialist white power who recognize that Christianity functions in many ways as an ideological glue for the entire white world. And so this is what you had. Boukman, the Africans took up voodoo, not just as some abstract assumption, but as an assumption that was necessary to fight against the white man's religion, which was Christianity. And it was to negate the influence of Christianity in our lives, so that we were the ones who were able to define philosophically who it is that we were, and who we had to define ourselves was something that was absolutely opposed to, in opposition to who the white man, the colonizer, is, and who the colonizer wanted us to be as a means of subduing and subjecting us to colonial domination. So voodoo did happen, and it was really important. But the thing that we understand is that voodoo is also something that was used by Papa Duvalier, who a Black nationalist, who was one of the serious oppressors of our people under US imperialism for a long period of time. And after the revolution in Haiti, we are not informed, put on a revolutionary trajectory with voodoo. And the same thing is true. You see that people in Africa, the Lord's, the army of something like that in Uganda. You see various kinds of organizations who assumed religious philosophy, idealism, as a means of contending with the colonizer. And this is a means of contending with the colonizer because all over the African world, the priest and Christianity was used as a horrific weapon to take away the belief system of those who they wanted to subdue and who they wanted to subject to colonialism. And so this was the response, that religion became the tool, the method by which the colonizer imposed its will on us. Then religion, our own religion, was something that we created to defeat or negate the imposition of the colonizer's will through philosophy, in this instance, Christianity. We're not the only ones. You see, even when you look at today, when you look at this whole question of jihad throughout the Muslim world, you're talking about people who are responding to crusades. And the thing is, like, this religion, just like the Pope's papal bulls that legitimized slavery and said which colonizer should be able to control what section of the trade in Black people, what you see is that the so-called crusades, which was supposed to be something that Europeans were using in order to find the Holy Grail. It was like a Christian crusade. So there's no report of them ever finding the Holy Grail, but what they did find was a lot of loot. And so they stole all kinds of resources from the people under Christian banner. So they flew the Christian banner as a cover for a looting expedition, a colonial looting expedition that spread throughout the what they now refer to as the Middle East. And the same thing has happened by Christianity all over the world. And so you have these people who are Christians as a consequence of colonialism having dominated our lives and Christianity having been used as an ideological weapon against the people that destroyed and negated our own belief systems. And so voodoo was a response to that. And it was a belief system that was there to negate the power, the influence of the colonizer. So there is truth to that voodoo was significant, but it was not a scientific explanation of what the hell was happening and what was that put in motion this colonizer that we had to fight and have to fight all over the world. So I'm mentioning this because there are so many things that we need to learn from the Haitian Revolution. And first thing I want everybody really to understand here, that the role, the significance of the Haitian Revolution, it was the most profound assault on capitalism that ever happened in its existence, as a total assault on capitalism, as something that assaulted capitalism as a world economy, and not just as something that was happening in Manhattan or Manchester or in some other isolated single place like that, as people would like for us to understand the question of capitalism. Capitalism was born as a world system, and it was born as a consequence of colonial slavery. It is what Karl Marx referred to as the primitive accumulation that was necessary for the capitalist production to happen in the first place. It was the starting point. This is what Karl Marx called some kind of primitive accumulation. But what we refer to and recognize today as colonialism, he said it was turning Africa into a warren for the commercial hunting of Black skins. He talked about how it was England making war against China to turn China into a nation of junkies with the so-called Opium War. And we've seen this colonial spread throughout the whole world. This is how capitalism started. Can you imagine the existence of capitalism without colonialism? When you talk about colonialism, you're talking about the settler colonialism, that's the United States. You're talking about the colonialism that created most of the entities that we know in South America that came from slavery and stealing the resources and land of the indigenous people. There would be no such thing as capitalism without that. So what we're saying is the question of colonialism. Colonialism is foundational. The whole capitalist system rests upon a foundation of colonialism, and it rests as a global system, not something that just exists in one place, which is global, which is why when the United States government moved against, I think in 91 or sometime thereafter, against John Baptiste Aristide, who won the first perhaps democratically called election. I think that would have been 1991. He was in power. He was overthrown. The U.S. government brought him back because of they could not control the situation. They needed him back to give the semblance of some kind of democratic process. When he was finally overthrown, the United States government came in, put him on an airplane, and then flew him out of Haiti into the Democratic African Republic, the Central African Republic, which was a French colony. So, and this is even at the time where the US was supposed to be so upset with France because France was dealing with Iran, while the United States were trying to create an economic quarantine on Iran, and they wouldn't even eat French fries. They call them freedom fries instead of French fries. And of course, the fries they're talking about came from the colonized indigenous people who introduced the white man to the potato in the first place. Colonialism is the dominated, fundamental, foundational thing that we're talking about that gave birth to capitalism and also gave birth to the ideas that stem from this kind of economic base, and it was global, not just in Haiti, everywhere. And so that's what we're looking at. We're not looking at a small thing. And then when the Africans in Haiti made that revolution, and they, as I mentioned, they had to swim through all kinds of currents and contradictions in Haiti itself. The so-called mulattoes, the so-called free Africans, and many of whom at different times would align with the white people who were against the royalty, were against the colonial French, but they also wanted to maintain colonialism under their direction, all of this stuff. And the workers rose up, and the African enslaved workers rose up, and they became the profound force that made this revolution. But at this time, what you had was the world economy revolved around colonial slavery, not just in Haiti, but the whole world economy revolved around colonial slavery. And the basic theoretical foundation of the capitalist system was anti-Black, generally speaking. This was where you get this stuff that you call racism spreading across the globe. And so Africans made this revolution in Haiti. And when they made the revolution, they declared that any slave anywhere on earth, if you got to Haiti, you would be free. They created a profound contradiction for the survival of capitalism, of colonial capitalism. Africans in Haiti did that. And it was deep and it was profound. And especially when you consider that most of the ideas that people have about us revolves from this kind of social system, this colonial capitalism. This is the ideological foundation of capitalism, is what people refer to as racism. And it has to be, because this is a means by which a social system explains its existence at the expense of the colonized, of Africans and other people who don't look like the colonizer, who don't benefit from what the colonizer is getting. And I think that's really important. It's not just that we don't look like him. The fact is that he benefits as a consequence of our being enslaved and under his authority. So it's really important that you look at this whole project of Haiti. You look at the significance that Haiti had to the whole capitalist system in the world. And then after that, you're talking about a system that becomes the first so-called Negro Republic in the world. This is in Haiti. And this is at a time where Africans everywhere were supposed to be living under colonial domination. And these Africans in this tiny island had the temerity to break out of French colonialism and declare themselves a republic. That was repugnant to the whole notion of colonial philosophy and colonial capitalism around the world. And so this is what we had. And then you see in this process the genius of the African masses, and that would include, to some extent, Toussaint Louverture, who became a really important figure, and in many ways you can say was the person who was the architect of the Haitian Revolution. He did, the incredible military genius, extraordinarily influential force, physically and otherwise. Toussaint, and So this is Toussaint, who defeated France for all practical purposes. But he was different from the masses. He, in the sense that he could read. Not only could he could read a little Latin. He had read important philosophical books written by French persons. He never had endured slavery as such. So he came from a relatively privileged situation, as privileged as someone can be living under slavery. That was Toussaint. And one of the best books you will be able to find on the Haitian Revolution is written by a person, C.L.R. James, somebody I knew, by the way, only passing. But he wrote this book, The Black Jacobin, or Jacobin. And he speaks, so highly at first of just the whole revolutionary project, the revolutionary enthusiasm, the revolutionary genius of the masses of our people in Haiti. But he has a special kind of appreciation for Toussaint, who he declared to be, so intelligent, and he could read, and he could sit down and talk with like the French and other people, etc. And so he was held in high esteem, and he was brilliant. There's no denying that. But the thing is that he was also somebody who succumbed in a very important way to the ideas of the French. He thought that when the French said they wanted to negotiate this peace with him, and he never intended to declare independence from France, he intended to rule as the governor general over San Domingo under French domination. That was his intention. So he was invited to come down and get on this ship and negotiate this treaty with France. And again, it was not to be a treaty that was that the French would abdicate any kind of authority or leadership over Haiti. It was something that would have allowed the Haiti to exist as a province, something to that effect, under French domination. And he got on the ship. And when he got on the ship, they sailed off. This is extraordinary. Here, this guy, this brilliant general, got on the ship. They said, let's negotiate on the ship. He got on the ship. What kind of brilliance is that? What kind of genius is that? What kind of confidence in the oppressor is possible, especially given the terror and that France had imposed on our people there in Haiti? What in the hell would make it possible for this military genius to get on that ship after he had been defeating France all over the island? What made it possible for him to do that? And of course, it was philosophy. It was the fact that he had succumbed to the philosophy of the oppressor. He actually believed that the French would treat him like the gentleman that they usually treat conquered, or even not conquered in this instance. They were negotiating a treaty that France had effectively lost, and they took off with him. And that left, of course, Jean-Jacques Dessalines as the person who was in charge. And Dessalines was straight out of the working class. He was what Malcolm X would have called a field Negro. He was a straight laborer. He was one of the enslaved Africans, and who, as I have heard, initially was telling Toussaint, don't go get on the ship. And so we learned a lot about that, because Toussaint was really prepared to establish himself as a neo-colonial leader of Haiti. And then you have this man, Dessalines, who was straight from the most oppressed sector of the African workers in Haiti, who was opposed to that and then completed the revolution. And the thing about Dessalines that makes him so hated by many people today, French, and then even some misguided Africans, some of whom live in Haiti today, is Dessalines did tit for tat. And he was absolutely determined that they were not going to accept any negotiated settlement, nothing like that with the French. The objective was to destroy the power of France in Haiti, absolutely, with finality. And they did. And they destroyed French power. They destroyed the French administration. They killed as many of the whites colonizers as it was necessary to kill. And without hesitation, they did these things. And at the end of the day, they were in control of a Haiti that had been won through the arms of the people, and they created a government that determined, a constitution that determined that everybody who was a Haitian, everybody who lived in Haiti was going to have to be a Haitian. And everybody who was a Haitian would have to be characterized as Black. This is what they did. They had to be characterized as Black. And then what they determined was that white people could not own land in Haiti. Just the Black people, who would include those white people, some of the Polish and Germans and what have you, fought along the Africans in the revolution, could be considered Haiti, which means they're Haitians, which means they were Black. And the other thing that was so important about what the Haitian Revolution did under Dessalines is that unlike people, they didn't declare themselves some kind of new Africans in Haiti. They declared that they declared the country Haiti and themselves Haitians, because that was the name of the people who had been murdered and decimated by the French. They killed off the indigenous people who were there. And so what they did was in the Haitian Revolution, the statement was that the Haitians still live, and the resistance of the Haitians still live in those of us who are now existing in Haiti. And that was a really important kinds of thing that had happened with the Haitian Revolution. So there was not that much confusion there. But what you should understand is that the United States government has never finished attacking our people on that island for the reasons that I've just mentioned, suggested, and for the fact that Haiti continues to be the symbol of African resistance and the ability of the African workers to take our own power, to make our revolution under the leadership of the African working class. And the French have succeeded, along with other colonizers, in contaminating the consciousness of a whole lot of people about Haiti. And you find Africans from Haiti who've been pushed out and scattered around the world. They're in Miami, they're in Bahamas, they're in various other places, and in many of those places they're treated so badly by Africans ourselves, who don't want to be identified with Haiti, because Haiti is Black. But Haiti was revolutionary. And so Blackness and revolutionary became synonymous. And to be identified as Haitian was to be uncivilized and to be unruly and to be all the negative things that was defined by our enemies, and it was to be the voodoo people and this kind of thing. Well, movies were made about that throughout the United States and other places around the world. This was a slander that was waged against the African people from Haiti, and it continues even today. But it's really important to understand that what we are talking about is a serious process of the creation of the social system itself. Let me just say that the US occupation of Haiti was really serious, and that in 1915, 1934, for example, the Marines invaded Haiti. And listen, they looted the Haitian treasury, and they stole every single ounce of gold. They murdered the people's leaders. They installed neo-colonial domination in Haiti, and they forced at gunpoint the government of Haiti to rewrite the constitution and end the prohibition of white people having land in Haiti. This is not about juvenile Moise. This is about a bigger process that we are confronted with and struggling with right now today. And so the United States maintained ownership of the Haitian treasury until 1947. And then, but what you should also know is that after the revolution, all kinds of things were trying to happen throughout the Americas, inspired by the Haitian Revolution. The Mexican president, the Afro-Indio-Mexican president Guerrero, attempted to fund an expedition by Africans from Haiti to go into Cuba to liberate the African enslaved people in Cuba. You had people who were trying to make revolution throughout the Americas who turned to Haiti, and Haiti supported them, and Haiti gave all kinds of assistance to revolutionary movement that was happening throughout the Americas. And then what you saw, of course, was that the French demanded reparations from Haiti after the revolution. And this reparations was to pay for lost French property that included African people ourselves. And the whole white world united with France and initiated an economic quarantine on Haiti until Haiti paid this reparations to France. And this is something that went on for nearly 100 years in terms of resources stolen from our people in Haiti. This is a statement about the critical role that the African Revolution has played in Haiti, the Haitian front of the African Revolution. This is something that really should be understood. This is not a little thing, it's a small island, but the power of that revolution, the centrality of that revolution in the struggle against capitalism as it was unfolding, this is something that gave Haiti and what happened there a magnified significance in the whole world, And so much so that when I think about some of the white left and sometimes Marxist leaders that they want to promote, I'm familiar with something that's called the Spartacus League. I think it started in Germany, and then they had an expression of that Trotskyist kind of formation that existed in the United States and perhaps in other places. But Spartacus was somebody who fought against the Roman Empire some many years ago and was defeated. But the Haitian Revolution was the first successful revolution and slave revolution in the whole world, the first in the whole world, not just in the African world, the first successful revolution of enslaved people in the whole world. It was the first workers' revolution in the whole world happened in Haiti. But you don't hear any of them calling themselves some kind of Dessalines League, or something to that effect, because the colonial question permeates all of the senses of the people who lives throughout and under the auspices or with the influence of the entire world capitalist system that represents itself philosophically as a superstructure resting on a base of colonialism, economic base of colonialism. And so I think it's important, like to be able to say that. And again, that voodoo played an important role as a negation of Christianity, but then Duvalier was the Black nationalist expression of voodoo, and that was something that was used against our people. So we see these kind of clear examples of the inadequacy of religion as philosophical guide. And so we had Duvalier, who was in 1957, some 10 years after the United States government gave over lost ownership of the Haitian treasury. That happened in 1947. Francois Papa Doc Duvalier, whose regime lasted from 57 until his death in 1971, was installed by the United States government. And again, he used the Black nationalist expression of voodoo that was used against our people. And then his son, Francois, 19-year-old Francois Duvalier's 19-year-old son, John Claude Baby Doc Duvalier, would take office until being overthrown in 1986. And so this is part of the history. And I'm saying this because this notion that somehow this guy, Juvenal Moise, desecrated the constitutional prohibition against staying in office over a certain amount of time, and it has used thugs and killers to suppress us is the problem. That is not the problem. That's an expression of the problem. And the problem is colonial capitalism that came into existence and cannot exist without the domination of colonized peoples all around the world, and Haiti being one of them, and Haiti being the critical one because of the example that it has established for not just Black revolution, but Black workers' revolution. So, Haiti has gone through, that earthquake with 250,000 people killed, with 300,000 people injured, that was in 2010. 1.5 million people made homeless. We, within the Black is Black Coalition, Social Justice, Peace, and Reparations, went in February into Haiti, and not to Haiti, but into Miami, and to what was characterized as Little Haiti, organized demonstrations in solidarity with our people in Haiti. And that what we demanded was that reparations be paid by France to Haiti, that reparations be paid by the United States government to Haiti for everything that they have stolen, and the restitution of the democratic elected president in Haiti. These were some of the demands that we made then. And so then we see the extension of U.S. influence and authority in the form of the United Nations, where in 2010, the United Nations is there, and we are afflicted for the first time in the history of Haiti with cholera, and something that lasted for 9 years. And this was the United Nations that brought it there. It never existed before. 820,000 cases of cholera. 9,800 people died in cholera. So, you know, this discovery of Haitian problems and Haitian suffering, etc., can be sometimes even viewed as hypocritical, because African people in Haiti, like African people globally, have been suffering all this time, and we're not just suffering under some problematic leader there, we're suffering because of the system itself, foundation of the whole capitalist system, founded on colonialism, and then founded in Haiti plays such a fundamental role to the emergence of capitalism and the whole colonial system that dominates the rest of the world. And that's what it is that we're looking at. And in Haiti, the government is a joke, got an estimated something like 10,000 NGOs operating on the ground, the largest per capita, the largest number of NGOs per capita in the world is in Haiti. And some of these NGOs played an important role, because when you talk about the earthquake that happened with all the people dying there, and the money that the Red Cross got for that, the money that I'm talking about these Clinton crackers, the one whom you call the first Black president, the one that you were working your butt off to try to get elected as president just recently, the one who is part of the process that initiated the kind of colonial terror in Libya, the one who was the carrier of for the so-called crime bill put forth by the current president, Joe Biden. These Clintons, they've cleaned up. They got millions and scores of millions of dollars that were their NGOs that were supposed to go to our people in Haiti. So Haiti is suffering like hell, but the people are strong and have always been resisting in Haiti. And then you know, you got Haiti colonized by France, neo-colonialism, people resisting. You got Guadeloupe, where the French corporations and what have in Guadeloupe and Martinique are actually poisoning the people with something that they've been using to so-called kill the weeds and insects on the banana leaves that the people are engaged in growing and harvesting for them. And people are being confronted with all kinds of cancers and physical abnormalities and what have you. You've got Martinique, where the people are experiencing the same thing as Guadeloupe and still living under French domination. Senegal, that uprising and struggle happening in Senegal right now against French colonialism. Mali, Chad, all these places where people are rising up against France. This is the colonial power. And we're suffering from that colonial power in Haiti. It's not enough just to be talking about this guy. Because you know Jovenel Moise. You know him in your own community, in your own city, in your own state, wherever it is you locate. He's a neo-colonial stooge. He's somebody who facilitates the domination of our people by white power colonialism. And so this is not new. This is something that's been going on for a very long time. So we are having the same experience as colonized people, whether we're in Haiti or whether we're in what they call South Africa or St. Louis or Missouri, etc. The system acts the same in Haiti as it does in Kentucky with Breonna Taylor and other people, where the attorney general is in so-called African, Daniel Cameroon, African American. This is part of it. And if you want to find out about the French Caribbean islands where poison is being used, it's called chloroquine. And you can locate it, you can Google that and find out what is happening there. So the people are fighting and resisting everywhere. And I think there's much that we can be learning from Haiti, that revolution is possible, that revolution is necessary, that revolution under the leadership for national liberation, under the leadership of the working class is essential. And the other thing that I think we learn about that is that a revolution has to be fought to finality. You can't dilly-dally with it. You can't negotiate its end. It has to be complete. It has to be won. Even with the negotiation with France and Vietnam, the Vietnamese would go to negotiation with the French. In the final analysis, they would participate in negotiations as a political ploy, just like the French were doing, just like the Americans were doing. But in the final analysis, the Vietnamese took their freedom. And that's the only way that Vietnam and the Vietnamese people have any kind of integrity and walk anywhere they go in the world with their heads high, if they want to relate to that revolutionary project. And that's not going to be different for African people either. We are going to have to take our freedom, take our liberation. And that's critical for us to understand. Now, I want to just say this and get out of your way, because I think that, some of the most important anti-colonial theory was initiated by Africans who were colonized by the French. You go back to the whole group of dealing with negritude. You're talking about Aimé Césaire. You're talking even Senegal, Senghor at a particular time. You're talking about people like Albert Memé, who lived under French colonial domination in Tunisia. Talking about Frantz Fanon. You're talking about even people like Cheikh Anta Diop. French colonized Africans have made major and fundamental contributions to theory about colonialism. And that's important, because one of the most problematic things that we've had to deal with as African people is the absence of theory. And some people say, well, you're talking about theory because that's something that's in the clouds and above the people. That's not true. It is theory that anchors our activity. It is theory that tethers us to a real to what end. It is theory that maintains our objectives as a people in terms of winning our freedom. Without theory, then what you have is people going this way and that way, depending on what's happening at the moment. It's theory that says this is the outcome that we're looking for. It's theory that provides the whole strategic trajectory of your revolutionary movement. Theory is absolutely necessary for revolution, and revolution is absolutely necessary for our freedom. And so this is a really important question. That's why people so love Fanon. I'm in the civil rights movement in the 1960s, and Fanon comes out, the wretched of the earth. And I'm reading Fanon, and I'm reading other people who are now having to grapple with this question of colonialism. And of course, even by that time, I'm writing about colonialism, but Fanon makes such a major contribution. And there are others who are doing the same thing. And I'm saying this particularly, it seems to be like a lot of that was centered under French colonialism, that you had this revolutionary theory. And I'm saying it also because theory is necessary. Don't let somebody tell you that theory is not necessary. It is theory that will not allow us to be engaged in, as a philosophy, some philosophical idealism that revolves around this God versus that God, or something to that effect, that don't tell us what are the objective material interests that are being fought against and fought for. That's what we need to understand. And theory gives us that. And the African People's Socialist Party, over more than 2 generations, have been developing the theory of African internationalism. And it's African internationalism that connects us with Haiti, that let us know that we are one Africa, one people who have been forcibly dispersed around the world in the process of building the global capitalist system that dominates the whole world. Colonial capitalism is the system that we are up against, that we have to defeat. And every honest person in the world that says that they're against, that they are for revolution, that they're for the destruction of capitalism, they're for socialism, must necessarily join in the struggle to the destruction for the destruction of colonialism. That is the foundation of the capitalist system. And most of that revolves around the question of Africa and African people. And you can see that as all the predators during this deepening crisis of imperialism, where are they going more and more but to Africa, to continue to deepen the theft of our resources in Africa, around the world. This is what's going on. And the African worker revolution is critical to the defeat of capitalism as a social system. And everybody who is really truly engaged and interested in overturning capitalism should become African internationalists and join under the revolutionary struggle of the advanced detachment of the African working class, which is the African People's Socialist Party. That's what we're talking about. So I want to say that that we have a responsibility to spread African internationalism. That's what has to happen. There's all kinds of efforts are being made all the time to obscure what our struggle is all about. They'll have us fighting a gnat, like Jovenel Moise, as the solution to our problem. That ain't the solution. I just want to say this, that this process of colonial slavery created a whole new mode of production. It's colonialism, it's a mode of production. And that's how you have to understand it. And with the advent of colonialism in the world, part of what we're saying is that instead of separate, more or less self-contained worlds existing in casual relationship to each other, there's one capitalist world system united by a parasitic economic relationship imposed by Europe upon the rest of us. There is, therefore, no European reality separate from that of Africa and the rest of the world. The entire world is now locked into a single dialectical process, a unity of opposites, whereupon the gruesome extraction of life and resources from Africa and the rest of the world is a condition for the life and development of what we now know as Europe, white people, and the capitalist system to which we have been forcibly affixed. The legal system, the culture, the white sense of sameness, and political institutions are reflections of this parasitic economic base. Every white aspiration and dream, every expectation for happiness and a good life, from a successful marriage to a secure future for their children, requires drone strikes in Pakistan, police murders and mass imprisonment in the African colonies and barrios in the US, and starvation and forced displacement of the oppressed throughout the world. This is something that comes from the political report to the 6th and 7th Congress of the African People's Socialist Party. And so we've been dealing with this question. So we find now that it was the colonialism as a mode of production that destroyed European feudalism, destroyed the European feudalist state, and gave birth to a new mode of production. And this new mode of production has been called capitalism. But capitalism is, as Karl Marx said more than one occasion, that he talked about this capitalist system that he referred to as wage slavery, requiring as a pedestal slavery pure and simple in the New World. And this slavery was colonialism. This is where it all came from. And so feudalism was overturned by white people consolidating themselves as European and going out to Africa and much of the world to loot the resources. And this was where you have this new social system, a new mode of production known as colonialism and colonial slavery that gave rise to the capitalist world economy. And so the revolution in Haiti threatened the colonial social system and almost single-handedly destroyed the capitalist world economy. So our responsibility now is to take this theory of African internationalism that I was just talking to you about and spread it among the African masses of the world, including in Haiti. Yes, let's engage in every demonstration, every protest at every Haitian embassy that we can, opposing what is happening to our people there. Yes, let's protest the Biden and the Biden administration and all of the politicians in the United States who can make a difference in what is happening to African people in Haiti. But finally, we're going to have to make the African revolution. The African People's Socialist Party has been aware of this for a long time. That's why we are in the Caribbean right now. That's why there are even people from Haiti who are part of the African People's Socialist Party. That's why the African People's Socialist Party is doing work not only in the Caribbean, but we are in Africa, in various places in Africa. We are in South Africa, we are in Mali, we are in Uganda, we are in Tanzania, we are in Ghana, we are in Sierra Leone. We are moving throughout because Africa is going to have to be made free. And we are not going to be made free by simply trying to substitute the battle that we engaged in a particular place for the overall struggle to liberate all of Africa, all of our resources and African people around the world. We have to become a self-governing people under the leadership of the African working class. That's why we are all over Europe. We're in Germany, we're in France, we're in England, what have you, and we are active in various other places in Europe. That's why we're throughout the United States as well. Africa has to be free, and the Haitian revolution has to be seen as the Haitian front of the African revolution, just as, and that gives Haiti, the African, our brothers and sisters in Haiti, a connection, an organization and philosophical connection with Africans in the United States and around the world. That's the road to victory. We will win. We are winning, Uhuru.